Hey Max, how you doing?
Trolling. I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing really good. So, the first episode of our new podcast.
Oh yes.
I think we're going to be calling it Unscripted because it's very unscripted, as people who are
unscripted. Yeah.
People who have potentially started watching this may see. We're just diving in and doing this unscripted and just chatting. So I think let's start by just introducing ourselves for anyone who is unfamiliar with us. I think people will probably be unfamiliar with me, but more people might know you. But still, introduce yourself and let's just talk a little bit, maybe fairly shortly without going into our entire histories, just who we are, what we do, your history.
I think entire history might be saved for later if needed. But
yeah.
In short, my name is Max. My artistic name is Max Morton, and I'm based in Kyiv, Ukraine. I'm mostly known as the sound producer, mixing engineer, mastering engineer. Mostly I work in genres like metal, extreme metal, sometimes something in between. And some of my favorite clients and some of my most well-known clients are Jinjer, obviously, Shokran, Ignea, my own project called Morton. So there's that. I used to create a few educational videos with Unstoppable Recording Machine, whatnot. So yeah, tell us about yourself now.
Yeah, I remember when I first got into audio, first got into mixing, I would research on the internet and I came across the Andy Sneap forum. And for years, I didn't post very much on there, but I was following a lot of posts by tons of people now who are very well known. You know, like people like Joey Sturgis and obviously Andy Sneap's stuff. And then there's people like Armin Hamidovich from...
By the way. Armin,
yeah.
A few others like Will Duff, if I'm not wrong, if I'm not mispronouncing.
I think Jeff Dunn was on there as well.
Yeah.
Like
loads of people. Also, some of my earlier clients, like the first international clients, they came from that forum.
Mm-hmm.
And also thanks to the collabs we used to do there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, great times if you think about it.
Yeah.
People back then, people on the forums, it's totally different way to deliver information and to exchange information. People were writing longer posts. Like, there were less memes, but the memes that were there, they were brilliant. Like, how do drums?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember the little smiley? How do drums?
It was just a random guy who posted, how do drums?
A
random guy. And then I don't think he ever replied or wrote ever again. Mm-hmm. And it just became a meme. But yeah, I remember... I was obsessed with just reading people's posts, reading discussions, reading other people's discussions as a way of getting information about how to do things, you know. And I remember you used to post like guitar tone videos, and you had like some really good one with a frameless guitar, and like there was a.
Oh yes, there was a frameless guitar and
a good Marshall one,
maybe.
And, yeah.
So funny, I even forgot that I've been posting these things there. Like, YouTube era for me is something different from the forum era.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Glenn Fricker came from there.
Yeah.
His huge manual, like drum recording manual.
Yeah, I remember that.
I literally used that for my first ever live drum job.
Mm-hmm.
We hired a studio, and I have never recorded drums before. And I used all I've got, all the knowledge I gained from Andy Sneap forum.
Yeah, it was
crazy if you think about it.
But I was thinking about it recently because back then it's like forget about things like URM and Nail the Mix, these kind of things. There wasn't really any of the current popular mixing channels that we have today, or mixing websites, stuff like Mix with the Masters,
mixing
or
videos.
There weren't any. It was the forum, really.
There were a couple
maybe
of really irrelevant non-metal recording videos,
but not really any brands, you know, like big brands.
Yeah. Also, the information delivery in the videos was so different. It was more scripted.
Mm-hmm.
See what I did there?
Yeah.
More scripted. And also less in your face, straight facts, just the things you need to know to move further. It was a huge, like VHS style edited chunk of information that you do not really need in that way, delivered that way.
Yeah.
And in thinking like that, well, I think that now it's a better time to learn, time, because the material to explore is just endless. And not only the bigger names like URM or Produce Like a Pro, but also small indie channels where you can get lots of little tips and tricks you'd probably never discover otherwise.
But I think potentially the biggest difference is now you have a lot of content which is from actual people who are doing successful stuff. Like, for example, now with URM or whatever, you can watch a famous engineer, you can watch a guy like Max Morton, like yourself, actually mix a Jinjer song. You know, whereas back then back then in the Andy Sneap forum days, it was people asking, "Oh, Andy, how did you EQ the snare on this kill switch engage song?" You know, and then he'd give, I probably did something like this. You know, whereas you can see how people are actually doing it nowadays. But anyway, that was where I first found out about you, on the forum, watching your videos, and I loved the tones that you were getting, because back then I was obsessed with trying to get good tones. You know how it is when you're first starting out. It's like you hear the tones that you hear on albums, and you hear a tone by Andy Sneap, like a Kill Switch or a Trivium, or and you compare it with your own tones.
Yeah, you're right, and I instantly recalled a few things. First off, there were two, so to say, schools of approaching guitar tones. One of them was surgical EQ as the method to deal with anything that was off. And another method was like, be careful with surgical EQ to leave the tone healthy and not to remove the wanted stuff, because you will always notice harmonics. You'll do the sweeping and you will always notice anything there. Everything that has to be there, you will also notice and try to eliminate it until you're left with nothing. And I remember that those first guitar videos that I was making during those years, I always left them unprocessed. And that was the thing. I even remember Ermin saying, commenting like, "Oh, nice raw sound," under the PV5150 pedal to amp comparison. There's a little pedal. By the way, I still have it, and I even demoed it a couple of weeks ago again, that ancient AMT P1 PV preamp, like transistor pedal, and it sounds awesome. It sounds really focused and nice, very, very good for the shows. I mean, I'd probably prefer it to the digital emulation. But returning to those days, it's very cool that people could start forming their personal style, just gathering little drops of information that were there. And actually scavenging for information sometimes is better for your brain than just having access on the daily basis to all the best information delivered in the best possible way. Like right now, if you want great source of information for studying sound engineering, you'll get it right away. You just grab it, you pay 15, how many bucks? I don't remember how much is the subscription for, let's say, URM. But you can easily get well-prepared information. And the drawback of that, the downside, I think, is that it's harder for you to develop your personal trial and error, blood, sweat, and tears style.
Yeah, but also, now that you're speaking about that, another thing that came to mind is, like, when I compare my experience of trying to learn things back in the day to now, it seems way easier now, of course, and like there's a lot more things available. But now that I think about it, I'm thinking I see people commenting on videos and stuff saying they're a bit overwhelmed. For example, when someone starts to nail the mix and there's like a 200 channel symphonic death metal song or whatever, and it's like this guy has never EQ'd a snare drum in his life. He doesn't know what the attack on a compressor is.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're getting bombarded with a full 200. I mean, that can be somewhat overwhelming, I guess, now that I think about it. But as you say, back in the day, it was like scavenging for little bits of info. So find a post where Andy's talking about high-pass filtering overheads at 500 hertz, for example, and like just using them as cymbal mics. Like that's one piece of information that I'd be using for years, and now that's like one way that I'd approach mixing metal drums, for example. But like come up with like a whole list of different tips and tricks from different engineers that when combined, you have a lot of good stuff there that you can apply to a mix.
It's very important and I think it's very important in any age and in any situation to develop the ability to learn. So to develop the mindset that will get you far.
Learning how to learn.
What you can understand. Yeah. So your personal search, finding your own methods, synthesizing things you already know, and of course in parallel to that, learning new stuff and being critical about the thing that's coming your way. So you take this, you don't take that. And that should be taught a lot these days, especially because it's so easy to get overwhelmed. You gave the example with 200 tracks Symphony Black Metal. I have another example of my own personal experience when I bought the Plugin Alliance subscription. And I literally had a weird depression for a couple of months because I had all those plugins and I only needed a dozen of them.
Yeah.
And I was like, I must be either I'm dumb or I'm too lazy. Maybe I'm getting old. Why I'm not using all those plugins? I have them. I should use them. I don't need that many. My eyes are rolling all over the screen. Maybe I should try something instead of just mixing. So I waited for a year or so. I bought all the plugins I really needed, and then I canceled the subscription because, of course, you gotta remain creative, and there is always a room for innovation. You gotta try new things, of course, to remain flexible and to remain on the edge of what's happening right now. But at the same time, when it comes to bread and butter mixing, when it comes to things that you always do and they work amazing, they have worked amazing 30 years ago and they will work amazing forever. Just stay where you are. In fact, my mixing has become so much better when I started relying on SSL-esque plugins for most of my tone shaping. I know the knobs. I literally stopped thinking of the curves or, well, it's what everyone says, that don't look at the curve. Well, sometimes you should, but at the same time, it's so satisfying to just turn the knob, sometimes even all the way, and get the exact tone, in the mix. It makes you 10 times faster, and sometimes you realize that when you're listening to the big picture, and I tested it even with referencing to the best recordings ever made, I realized that sometimes you don't need the surgical EQ at all.
Yeah.
Surgical EQ bad habits come from the times of our earlier days, earlier years in our careers when we had the worst possible source files.
Yes.
So when we had this horrible source material that we had to save from being thrown into the trash can, that's when we needed lots of surgical EQing. But as we grow, as our guitar tones are getting better, vocal tones are getting better, we barely need any of those cuts. Yeah. But the bad habit remains.
No, it's definitely that. It's like it's a weird combination of, as you get more experience, you find yourself doing less surgical EQ because you prefer doing broader moves, like boosting treble, boosting broad 60 hertz or 80 hertz or whatever. But as you say, it's not just that you're improving your mindset, it's also that your recordings are improving, and therefore you are needing less of that anyway.
Absolutely.
So it's like this. Yeah.
I tried a thing. I tried opening my ancient project. It was like maybe 18 years old project. And it was quite hard to mix without the surgical processing because it was bad. It was the room was bad, so I had to do something with 500 hertz. The mic was not as good, and the placement was weird, and the singer was sibilant, and we have such thing as Slavic sibilance, like all those languages, very sharp, 10 to 12 to 14K sibilants that always sound different, so you have to manually cue them, and if you cut out everything at once, you ruin the top end. So lots of things. But also, I think that we grow to appreciate the little imperfections in the frequency curves, because there is no such thing as perfect frequency curve. Perfect frequency curve is a synthesized, let's say, pink noise. Is it interesting? No, not at all. But when I turn on some cool late 90s, early 2000s metal recording, something like, let's say, Rob Halford's Resurrection, I really love that recording. It has amazing guitar tones that are asymmetrical, so one cabinet on one side, an amp on another side. And it's so cool to hear one of them, and it's really nasty. It has lots of resonances, and it's dirty and loud. You feel that it's loud, and it's blasting your eardrums like rock metal should do. And on the other, as the other guitarist enters, you hear that it's definitely another guitarist with another method of playing and the method of picking, and with another amp and a cab.
You can hear the personality of the person.
It's way more interesting. It's way more enjoyable.
Yeah, as much as we both probably double track often with the same guitar tone, like you say,
we do.
It's extremely distinct when you can hear, that's that guitarist playing, and that's that guitarist playing on that side, you know. Yeah,
but you gotta have a great pair of guitarists to do that.
Oh, of course, yeah.
As always, so as soon as we're getting better, we start having access. We finally get access to those old school approaches that only work when you have good guitarists, nice, well set up guitar chain, for example, or vocal chain. When you have all the parts of the equations set right, finally it starts working.
Yeah.
Everything else, like the most of the jobs we do, we still have to find compromise, do some surgical EQ here, over-edit things there, hide something that's off, because mostly, especially for the engineers who mix, who do not necessarily record, and you have no chance to control the process of recording. That's a totally different topic, and probably we'll discuss it one day, because if you have that access, for example, when the client contacts me and they're saying, we're going to record the album, and 3 months later we want to book you for mixing. I always send them my recording guide, and I try to provide as much information as possible for them to make the best possible recording, because I know that I will thank myself later when I get the tracks to be mixed.
Yeah, but even then, I mean, it's a thing of, obviously, it's a thing of time and experience, and like, you can tell someone to do a certain thing as many times as you want, but unless they really understand it from years of experience.
Yeah,
like,
you got to be very precise and very simple with what you're saying.
Just give me DIs, you know?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes you got to explain that. You got to send them the DIs that sound best, and analyze, A/B them, and pay attention to ABC, to the levels, to the attack, to the frequency response. Get the free amp sim and run them through the amp sim and compare them. And most of the clients are not stupid. They just had no chance to experience those things.
Yeah.
And a few times I've been really proud when I received great results from the clients who were not really into recording. For some clients who are using Reaper, I'm using Cubase, but I have Reaper. So for those who try to record DIY at home, let's say they buy, instead of renting a studio, they buy a microphone, a preamp. I usually recommend a SAM7B and a few preamps, a choice of preamps. I also tell them how they could set up a little vocal booth just using blankets and open bookshelves and things like that. And then I'm getting great results because they are relaxed, they're at home, they take their time, no one's watching, they don't feel stressed. They may re-ask me, we may re-record things on the fly. So while I'm editing, I say, re-record this and that. And man, what can be better? And again, we only have that luxury. Who was doing things like that back in the 70s and 80s? Only Steely Dan, as I remember right. They were recording things in different parts of the world, and they were recording DIs and reamping. That was not the thing. Now it's the thing.
Yeah. It's changed a lot, you know? But yeah, going back to just finishing up the Ultimate Metal Andy Sneap Forum part of our conversation.
Oh, yeah.
So that was where I first heard you, and I was, as you like talking about raw tones and stuff, I loved your tones. They were extremely inspiring. I mean, I for years I thought you were the best in terms of like guitar tones.
Oh, wow.
Like, and you said like if they were raw, they were flipping good raw. But that's the kind of thing that everyone's aiming for: good raw tones. You know, like
yes.
Barely any EQ. You're just using EQ on the amp and mic placement, and it sounds fantastic.
Just imagine the fun.
Yeah.
Just imagine the fun. You don't have to struggle.
Yeah. A lot of my
only
favorite,
when you're learning.
A lot of my favorite guys do stuff like that. Guys like Lasse Lammert from Germany as well. Like same kind of thing.
Oh yeah, he also was there.
Yeah, and he was also on the forums as well. Yeah. But anyway,
bought
so
his
that's
LSD drums.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's where I first discovered you. Before Jinjer even, I'm not sure if you were doing Jinjer back then. When did...
Not yet.
When did the first...
My first Jinjer collaboration was in 2013.
Yeah,
and they actually contacted me because I was also doing some videos back then. So I was getting better at videos, and I was even shooting free studio video diaries for all of my clients, but it was so exhausting. It was free, and I was trying to do it as good as I could. And I also edited one of my music videos, like for my band. And I was doing these together with my girlfriend. We were doing the guitar videos for my YouTube channel. It was always a lot of effort. And Jinjer first wrote me because they wanted to make a music video, and they were searching for a person to shoot the video. But I told them that I'm not that much into video making, and they had a very complex concept. They wanted to somehow to film a folding elevator that the band was playing in. It was totally beyond my range of expertise. But they decided to mix a song with me. It was no hoard of value. And they instantly loved the way I was mixing bass and vocals. We had a few experiments with guitars. Well, yeah, they were happy with guitars, but they didn't want the 5150 tone.
Yeah.
And I didn't have too many amps at that moment. I think I had Mesa Mark IV, I had 5150, and I had a Marshall. We ended up with 5150, but they were still quite happy with it. And then when it was time for them to mix the album, I gave them a good price, because there was something with Jinjer, and there is that gut feeling I have towards some of the clients whom I just like. I just want to approach them, and I want to make a discount. Sorry, other clients, I'm sorry. Not all of you are such clients, unfortunately. I'd love to make discounts for everyone, but then I'll probably ask for discounts at the grocery store. But returning to Jinjer, we mixed Cloud Factory that they recorded in their hometown, far away, on a budget also. So it was a very limited in terms of, let's say, not in terms of quality as is, but I mean, there was no such thing as a drum room, and the drum microphones were weird, and the drum heads were old. They were on a budget, but the recording was so cool. And we managed to create the mix that some people still love the best because it's so different. It's very underground and raw. And we ended up trying different things. We ended up with Kemper profile over rectifier because they wanted a rectifier tone. And the next thing that really made them big, and another time I had a gut feeling about them, is when they finally decided to record a song with me, not just mix, but record. So they came to Kyiv, and they were on a very tight budget, on such a tight budget that I literally earned nothing because I forgot we were recording the drums at another studio. And when we were leaving, there was no one in the studio, and I accidentally took the keys with me. And the next band who came to record drums could not record the drums because I had the keys with me and we were far away already.
Yeah.
So I had to pay for the time and I had to pay for the band's time. Gotcha. And I actually left without any money for this recording. But it was Sit Stay Roll Over single.
Yeah.
They made a really cool music video with a dog.
That's the first one I saw, yeah. When was that? Was that 2014 or
2015?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's when I first kind of I knew you, but that was the first time I heard your mixes, you know.
I mean, yeah, they also had a different drummer then. And afterwards they had a contract with Napalm Records, and we started just recording albums. I always had that good feeling about Jinjer, and I could probably elaborate it logically, so I could find all the reasons on the back of my head. Why did I feel good about them, and why I feel bad about certain bands that I haven't worked with. So I just found a reason to say that I'm busy. But sometimes, by the way people approach you, or by the way people write, by the way people sound or look, you might notice a few things that sometimes you feel like it's just not worth doing.
And I think that's a topic we will go into a little more in depth.
One day we will. It's a very interesting thing. And I think it's very important for any engineer to develop it. Sorry.
Yeah. No, sorry. I'm sorry for cutting you off. Yeah, we could potentially talk about that a bit more today as well. But So 2015 was Sit Stay Roll Over, which is when I first heard Jinjer and first heard your mixes, which I thought were very impressive. Yeah, at that time.
Thanks.
And
for that time. Yeah.
Funnily enough, 2015 is the year when I first started getting proper work as well. So same year. So after years of messing around on forums and stuff, I studied audio at university for a couple of years, a couple of different universities, which was a huge waste of time. One of the biggest regrets of my life. It can be okay. You can make connections and you can learn some stuff, but it's just a huge amount of money.
Was it engineering? Was it more about engineering?
Yeah, it was. Well, mixing and mastering, but covering all topics really. So you had production, you had recording, you had tons of different stuff. But yeah, I won't say which universities or anything, but it was a waste of time, and I wouldn't recommend it. But that's another topic we can talk about with people later on. But after doing that for several years, as I say, I got most of my information, the stuff that I know, came from forums, watching people's videos, reading your posts, reading lots of people's posts, just getting little bits, as you say, scavenger hunting for information and just building up a bank in your head of things. But anyway, eventually in 2015, I decided I should start writing some blogs. Writing some articles about the things that I'd learned over the years. So I just went ahead and I wrote, I think I sat down and I left university. I said, basically I said, screw this, I'm not learning anything here. So I just dropped out of university.
That's right.
And I just said, I need to just do stuff. That's the best way I'm going to learn. I just need to do stuff and work with bands and work with people and make music. That's the best way I'm going to learn. So I just dropped out of university. I wrote I think I wrote 5 or 6 blog posts in one day, just on various topics of things I knew, and I just posted them. I think I posted them on the Facebook page for the Andy Sneap forum, the Ultimate Metal Facebook page. And anyway, when I posted these blogs, the very first day, I got a Facebook Messenger message from Eyal Levy from Unstoppable Recording Machine, from Eyal.
Okay.
And he said he really liked my blogs and would you like to write for URM? And URM had just started back then. So this is like the first 3 or 4 months maybe of URM. I can't remember exactly when, but they'd only just started doing the live mixes, Nail the Mix. So it was just like Joey Sturgis, Joel Wanasek and Eyal Levy had done their own Nail the Mixes. They hadn't really...
It started from, if I remember right, sorry for interrupting, if I remember right, their first podcasts were like them three sitting and just talking audio.
Yeah,
and they were also
adding
podcast, like little funny animation to their faces and things like that.
Yeah,
and yeah, I think you will just tell about approaching, among others, approaching me about the guitar tones. Was it 2016, 2017 or something?
Yeah, so I started writing for URM in 2015 and it went well. So they took me on permanently. So I was writing weekly blog posts on their website about all things production and recording and mixing. And then I think it was probably 2016, maybe 2017, I messaged you saying, can we do a blog together?
Probably
can we do an interview?
Probably 16.
Yeah, and we did an interview together about primarily talking about guitar tones, because obviously, as I mentioned,
I think I made the video about Mercurial Spark guitar amp sim. It was a fresh video, also completely raw tones.
Yeah.
And you contacted me, and you used that funny photo. I was sitting with the guitar, smiling, and there was a jumping cat in front of me.
Yep.
Yeah, but what I instantly recalled is the way you write, because our conversation was more freestyle like now, but you managed to organize things in such a manner that it was very easy to consume.
Yeah.
And to understand.
Thank you.
That's the teacher's talent that is very valuable, I think. Not only for the pupils, not only for those who study, but also for the teacher themselves. Because when you explain things, you understand them even deeper yourself. Yeah, but please go on about your...
No, thank you. That's good to hear. But yeah, it was... we just did like a fairly freestyle 3 or 4, maybe not 3 or 4, maybe 2 or 3 hour conversation. But I remember we talked on for quite a while because we got along quite well. But that was the first time we met, and we did the blog, and people liked it. And I did a bunch of other interviews with various people throughout the years as well. But yeah, basically I wrote for URM. I think for maybe 5 or 6 years in total, maybe a bit less, maybe 4 or 5 years. Primarily working for Eyal Levy, doing weekly articles, weekly blogs, and then after that, I also started working for Joey Sturgis personally for his JST website as well, which is for his plugins, doing some writing and blogs for him. So yeah, I started my audio career primarily without having done much production myself, dived straight into teaching it without actually doing much myself. But the funny thing is you can know all of the information, and all of the information you're giving to people will be 100% correct. Like you could probably go back and read a blog that I did back in 2015 and you would probably agree with all of it. That's not to brag to say, oh, I know everything, but it's like you can know all the information. It's one thing to know the theory and another thing to actually do it, you know? Which is something that
the third thing is to explain it so that other people would be able to apply it in practice.
Yeah. The thing is, I think I was pretty good at all of the writing and explaining it, that stuff. I think I was pretty good at all of that. But when I started actually working with bands and doing music, I realized that not all the theory works all the time. You know, because the theory a lot of the time applies to perfect recordings. You know, So you're
Yes,
assuming that
exactly.
you're assuming that you have a really good guitar tone. You're assuming that you have a really good singer with a really good microphone in a vocal booth. These kind of things. So when it actually came to doing a lot of production myself, I struggled a bit, and I had a couple of years where I was kind of doubting myself a bit. But anyway, so I wrote for URM for years, wrote for JST. After that, I went on to work with the Pro Audiophiles, which is another fairly well-known educational website. And various other people. I've done some writing for Bogren Digital, for Jens Bogren. And then, anyway, eventually, apart from the writing stuff, I started doing production, doing my own productions, improving my own productions. I'd obviously been doing stuff for years, but not at a fully professional level, just with amateur people, doing covers, doing various things. But I think in 2018, maybe, we started doing the covers for YouTube with my wife.
Yes.
Nusha, and that was when I contacted you again. So
that's when we met again.
Yeah, we'd kept in touch on Facebook, talking about various things throughout the years, and we got along pretty well. But it was in 2018 that I properly started applying everything I knew to properly engineering. Doing these covers for YouTube. We were living in Turkey at the time, as you know, doing Turkish, doing interesting covers of Turkish pop songs in different styles. So that's what we were doing, taking a Turkish pop song and turning it into a symphonic metal song, or turning it into a pop punk song, or whatever, as you know.
But also great covers, if I remember right. Like pop covers.
Hopefully, yeah.
What did we begin with? The first one?
The first one was One Kiss. It was a cover of
One Kiss?
Dua Lipa, One Kiss, yeah. I think.
Probably One Kiss, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember just giving it all I got because I really tried to make a good electronic music mix.
No, it was really good. And the thing I remember
about
that one is you added a bunch of stuff that wasn't there, and I was surprised. I'm like...
Yeah, mostly automation.
No, but you actually added some stuff that wasn't there as well, I think, like some additional sounds and stuff, and I was surprised because I'm like,
maybe even sounds. But, if I remember right, mostly I was adding lots of movement using automation, like EQ automation, filter automation, because I felt like, those synth sounds are naturally more static than live instruments, and we want some great results. And I think I was also analyzing the original recording, and I noticed that it had that. It had that. So, yeah. That's why I did it.
Yeah. But that was the first time we worked together as me being a client and you being the mixing engineer, as far as I remember.
Yeah, even not a couple, I think couple dozen tracks.
Yeah, I think we probably did 15 or 20.
Yeah.
20 covers. And anyway, long story short, the thing in Turkey is that the music industry in Turkey is massive. Really, really big. People might not be aware of it, but I think in Europe and apart from America, and you have the Korean pop and stuff over in Korea, but the Turkish music business is absolutely massive. You have,
and I was surprised to know.
For people who don't know, I mean, in Turkey you have artists that get 500, 600 million views on a song. It's massive. You have huge record labels with 10 million, 20 million subscribers.
And
so
completely isolated. You would never know.
That's Turkish. The thing. No one knows. It's completely isolated, and all of those views and everything, it's all internal. So it's just coming from Turkey. Turkish people listen to a lot of Turkish pop. They obviously listen to foreign stuff as well. But anyway, we did some covers together, and we were posting them on YouTube, and they were getting some fairly good views. I think some of them got 400, 500,000 views. So they were doing quite well. And we got noticed by, me and my wife, we got noticed by a famous Turkish pop star who owned a fairly big record label. And they contacted us on Instagram, and they wanted to meet us and do a deal. But again, long story short, I ended up working with the record label, and then that turned into me working with some fairly big Turkish rap artists and pop artists, some which went extremely successful. And I think you mastered a bunch of songs and mixed a bunch of songs.
And even a couple of albums, I remember.
Maybe.
I definitely remember one album that was probably was
Oh yeah, you did a
meant
live.
to be a live album.
Yes, it wasn't a live album. It was the live backing tracks for.
Yeah, it was meant to be a
for
live
a
backing
tour.
track. That's
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
meant.
yeah. Yeah, I remember.
No,
that
it was
as well.
quite an easy job, to be honest.
Yeah.
I enjoy these little projects because usually they were quite simple and they reminded each other. Just a small distraction, if I may. I must say, I just thought that it's a problem of any market that is completely non-English speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So any market that, let's say, I don't know, post-Soviet market, those countries that usually speak, let's say, Ukrainian, Russian, Belarusian, doesn't matter. There are lots of pop stars that are super popular. They gather huge audiences and they also have huge views, crazy budget, and no one will ever know anything about them outside of these territories, so to say, that once were one country. But probably there are I don't know, even let's say German or Swiss bands. Some of them, those who are not English speaking, you will probably never know about them. Do you know many German singing bands that are not Rammstein?
I was going to say Rammstein. They're probably the one band that does it in German, but no.
There's also Umf and Gott Minister.
Okay,
I like it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's it. I know no one else. Yeah, but sorry.
No, but like, that's true. The thing in Turkey is like you can be working with like. It's funny because if you go on my website, like my portfolio, there are some, for me and for Turkish people, there are some huge names on there, like really big names. People that you've also done mastering for. People like there was a female pop star called Derya Uluğ, which you mastered a song.
Yes.
And that's got like 10 million views or something. And then there was this rapper called Sefo in Turkey. I think you did some stuff. He's the biggest rap artist in Turkey. You know, like his songs get listened to in the hundreds of millions. But like if I say that to someone in the UK or America, like I don't care who.
You know what? I mixed for this guy.
Yeah.
And no one knows. It's so funny. I just realized, imagine CLA mastering, or let's say mixing. CLA is mixing for some Philip Kirkorov, very famous Russian singer, like pop singer. And no one would care.
Yeah. No.
That's funny.
But they do try. The pop stars and the famous people, they do try. And they've tried for years to try and get outside of that market and expand to the world. But it just...
almost impossible.
It's very rare.
I mean,
there's a famous Turkish pop star called Tarkan. Have you ever heard of Tarkan?
Oh, yes, I heard the name. Yeah.
Tarkan is fairly well known in Europe, as far as I know. But that's pretty much it. You know,
it's got to take a marketing talent, I guess, and a branding talent to create a project that would speak to the modern audiences.
It's that exactly. It's about speaking
using
to the audience.
Turkish color of. I mean the flavor, the naming even, right? Tarkan. Must be some guy from Turkey.
Yeah.
And then you add a bit of ethnic stuff to the nice, well-written pop melody that would be well perceived by the European market, by European audience that have different tastes in music and different preferences in what they would listen on repeat, probably. Probably. Yeah.
But most
there
of
was
the time,
that Turkey.
Yeah, most of the time, I think the kind of Asian Oriental music influence doesn't really translate very well when you listen when someone from England or America listens to it. They're not that interested. Like, for example, like a band like Shokran, the Shokran, the band that you work with, for example.
Yes.
Those kind of sounds. There's a band called Mirath.
Mirath probably, I don't know.
Yeah,
but they are really great.
Jens Bogren has worked with them. They're so good, but few listeners, and it's just such a shame because the music is is great, but it's very kind of arabesque and kind of
arabesque, and it's great. I mean, their song "Believer" for me just gives me goosebumps all the time.
That
and the
solo
music video
gives
is so
me
cool.
goosebumps. Yes,
that solo is freaking amazing.
The attack on the
I'm getting goosebumps right now.
No, the attack on that first, it's such a nerdy engineering thing. The attack on the first note of that solo, it's just beautiful. The way it comes in, it's just so punchy,
But they were feeling it. They were feeling it when they were writing the song, when they were playing the song, and when they were making the music video. It just all came together. But I think the magic is that with all those who exploit a certain niche thing, like let's say Persian metal.
Yes.
Well, you can do a few songs that use that, but you gotta somehow create all those other songs that are not relying on the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's where the hard things begin, because you don't want to, you probably don't want to, as a listener, you don't want too much of that.
Yeah, it's a mood thing. I mean, like if you're going to listen to
a mood thing,
to Myrath or Mirath, whatever the name, however the name is pronounced, you have to be in the mood to listen to that kind of thing because it's very specific. And as you say, like the albums are, they're all great music, but it's just a very specific style. You're not really going to get it from any other band.
But by the way, Believer, carry on, and you have the Oriental flavor. But the bass of the song is very like European metal. It's just a hit song, very hooky.
Delete the strings, delete the strings, delete the vocals, because the vocals have a lot of like melodies and all that. If you just had
remove the melismatics, just leave them straight.
Yeah, if you just
let Jorn sing it.
Yeah, if you just had the guitars, the bass, and the drums, it would just be a good progressive kind of power metal song.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, so we worked we collaborated on a lot of projects. I think we probably did 20, 30, 40, a lot of projects together for the record labels in Turkey. A lot of them got good views. Like I think in your portfolio, you've probably got a bunch of songs now from Turkey that have like 10 million. 10 million
I still
views
get
more.
People from Turkey adding them to my Instagram.
Yeah.
I guess people know something. I mean, the musicians in Turkey probably know something, that there is that guy who's been mastering Turkish pop music.
Yeah.
And they obviously know you probably as a producer.
Yeah, they do check out. I get messages a lot. I live in the UK now, but I get lots of messages from Turkey. It's just the reason I left Turkey was it's just not financially that viable with the way the economy is over there, and it's unfortunately because it was going well. There was a lot of success, but if you need to earn a living, you can be working with with a pop star that has hundreds of millions of views, and you're still getting paid $200, $300 for a mix. And it's just not sustainable, unfortunately.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
That's the same thing I can tell. Like I have most of my clients are from some other places like Europe, USA, some Asian countries, and that's the only reason I'm able to live relatively well, sustain my family and so on. Yeah. Otherwise, I'd have problems. But and that's another problem of being an isolated market.
Yes,
so to say.
Yeah, I mean, if I was working for the outside when I was living in Turkey, it would have been fine. It's just it's difficult. It's as you say, if all I'm known for is doing Turkish rap, and the people outside of Turkey don't care or don't know who those people are, then
exactly.
While I'm living in Turkey, how am I supposed to get customers from the outside? Which is eventually why I left, unfortunately. So now I'm in England.
But you left. I guess you left in time, and now is exactly the right time to probably start something, building up a different set of clients.
Yes,
and building a new name. And honestly speaking, again, I can relate to it because, although I'm very happy with how things are going, like I have a lot of projects to work on, I'd love to get more into softer rock music.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a huge fan of extreme metal, although I know how to play it, and some of my demos are closer to extreme metal.
Yeah.
I'd really love to work on softer genres of rock music.
You do get somewhat pigeonholed, like because you've always worked on extreme metal, you get extreme metal. You know, you won't really get a rapper messaging you, or you won't really get like someone doing a soft.
Thanks God, no rappers.
A soft singer-songwriter kind of acoustic song. You won't get that, which is the same thing that I had. I was just getting rap for years, hundreds and hundreds of rap songs, producing, recording, mixing, and it's like I like certain rap, but it's not my core, you know. I'm a rock and metal guy.
And that's probably one of those cases for any engineers out there. That's where you should not be passive. You got to try and channel where you want to be.
It's not going to happen on its own. You have to take steps in the direction you want to go. So, which is essentially what I did. So I basically stopped doing the rap. I stopped accepting clients for rap. Even though I was getting, I mean, as I say, we were doing well. I can't lie. It was going very well, but I was just like, creatively, it's not very fulfilling. which is when we stopped doing that and we started doing songwriting, which is primarily what we do now. So over the last 2 or 3 years, I've mainly been focusing on songwriting. I still do mixing and recording here and there when I need to, but primarily songwriting. My wife is a session vocalist. So we've written 600, 700 songs in the last 2 years, which is a fairly crazy level of output. But
that's crazy. I mean, it's so hard for me to embrace, although I understand that any professional would be way faster, way more efficient in what they're doing. Mm-hmm. But to me, the same feeling I get when my studio, my editing engineer and my friend, and he's a great session drummer, and he's so fast in recording drums.
Yeah.
For him, it's like a couple of hours. He gets the part, he gets it recorded, he gets it edited, and he sends it out to the client already edited with MIDI, with everything. And he even does revisions. He can re-record little parts. And it's so easy for him, and I just cannot embrace it. I cannot understand it.
It's the thing that we've discussed for years, which is like I can't understand how you can. It's like just the other day we were doing a song together, and I sent you a little thing for a revision, and you sent it back to me within like 5 seconds, and I'm like, how did you just make your decisions in EQ and do that all so quickly? With me, it would take hours for me to even just the basic like a guitar transition or whatever, I'd spend hours EQing it. Like for me, mixing, I spend a huge amount of time doing it and I overthink it. Whereas with songwriting, I don't overthink at all.
Our brains learn to find shortcuts, and we tend to, like the first time we do something, we just move around like that, and we move in circles, and we return to the first position, and then we get lost, and finally, eventually, we get there.
Yeah.
And after probably 100th thing we do, be it composing songs or mixing or recording drums, we realize that there are things that always work.
Yes.
And all our tools are in our pockets, and we know where every little screwdriver is.
Exactly.
And we just do the thing instantly.
Yeah. I mean, because you're very, very efficient and fast with mixing. Like I've sent you some songs in the past, and you just... there was like a rock song that me and my brother did that we sent it, and you sent it back within like a few hours, and it sounded flipping amazing. And I'm like,
thank you.
Sometimes you said with that project I mentioned, you said you were just really inspired by the song. Therefore,
it was also like, and again for the people who are listening, there is a mix that has like 25 tracks that are already very well organized, and everything is there. And you're just doing what the mix engineer has to do. You're just mixing it. And if it's a good song, good arranging and everything, consider yourself lucky. You'll do it within 2-3 hours and you'll do a great job.
Yeah.
But even for the experienced engineers, some other projects are not just mixing. They are meant to be mix ready, but if it's 200 tracks of black metal symphonic something, or if it's, let's say, if it's a catchy, nice little song, but it has a very complex arrangement of things you barely hear, and the artist has their vision, it might take a week for the experienced engineer also, just because your brain isn't. That's quite a maze for any
you have to get familiar
traveler. You gotta explore those things and probably make a few errors, and then you'll probably get quite a list of revisions from the demanding client, and you may be even burned out, and you may be even like lost for a short while. Even when you're experienced, that's okay. Sorry.
No, I agree. I mean, if you're unfamiliar, if you haven't produced a song yourself and then you're sent 200 tracks, you're just like, it takes a while to get used to what all those 200 tracks are doing. And
usually it's the first day just to mix prep. One day to mix prep.
Yeah. So, so songwriting recently has been my main thing, and we've been collaborating again recently with the songwriting stuff. So I've been writing a bunch of songs for various reasons, and you've been helping me out with mastering and mixing. So, and that's brings us to the current day where we are now.
That's a lot of fun, because we had a few video calls and we realized that our endless chats regarding everything audio related and whatnot were fun to take part at. It was actually your idea that it should become, probably we should at least try to make a podcast. And I was always thinking I'd like to do something that would heal me from being a perfectionist. You're also a perfectionist.
Yes.
So we tried something that would be as simple as possible. And what else can be as simple as just two dudes talking audio with as minimum preparation as possible, without any scripts, without any editing, without anything on our way, anything that would stop us and just force us to stumble in endless takes and editing. Does it look good enough? What's about the lights? What about the angles? What about the topics? Now let's divide the video into sections. Let's make tutorials within the video. And then it just clicked. We got to do a very simple thing.
Well, it's the same. Luckily, I'm recovering from my perfectionism. I feel like I've been in rehab the last couple of years, since I've been kind of just forcing myself to work quicker. I mean, because of how we work, we have a quick turnaround on stuff. We have to deliver things quickly and just get it done. And I think forcing myself into doing that has really rehabilitated me a lot in terms of perfectionism.
Absolutely. Yeah, but, same here. Actually, it's very important. It may sound wrong the first time people hear it. What, do you mean that we should work less? It sounds like cheating. But we're earning money. We're going to work hard. Well, we do work hard, but it doesn't mean that we should be inefficient. We got to work efficiently.
It's not about working hard. It's about
remove unnecessary stuff.
Yeah, it's like even though I say like I'm a lot better than I used to be, and like I think we've done maybe 5 songs in the last 3 or 4 weeks together. 5 songs. I mean that's pretty. I think that's pretty good in terms of 5 completely produced and written songs from scratch, finished, mixed, mastered, everything done. 5 songs, and that's on top of all the other work I have to do for my regular day job. So these are just. So I think that's pretty good. Anyway, the thing I was going to say is, in terms of, even though I'm a lot better than I used to be, and I've done 500, 600 songs, I think I'm way better at just getting on with things, making decisions. I still find that probably, I was thinking about this the other day, probably 70%, maybe 60% of my time spent working is still me just listening and listening and listening and listening and listening.
Oh, yes.
Over and over again.
Yes, that's
and just
true.
For no particular reason. It's just this weird thing of you just listening out for problems. And if you just got on with the work, just get on with it, I could probably get my work done 70% quicker, I think, if I could just eliminate that part of my brain, which is still there, which is just that need to just press play and listen. I'm sitting here, I know I should be working. I should be continuing. For example, if I'm recording vocals or whatever, I know I should just continue. But I'll just sit there and listen over and over and over again. Do you do that?
Yes. I know what you're saying. Yeah, I do that. And when I start doing that, I try to switch to another project. So as soon as I'm getting fatigued and I lose my concentration, I lose the perspective, and I feel like I'm getting not just bored, but like, for instance, I'm mixing the drums. I've got the fresh edited project from my assistant, and I open up the project and I start mixing instantly. And things are turning really fast because I have the MIDI to blend the samples and to route to the gates, and I'm getting nice kick tone, then I'm getting the overheads. Okay, I can't wait to get into the room tone because now I want it to sound bigger and I want to start hearing the snare and toms a little bit. I'm getting the room tone and then I'm getting the snare because I just love smashing the SSL channel on the snare to get the attack and to get the bite out of the snare.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I realized that I'm not very interested in how the toms sound anymore. Like at this point, I'd love to do something else. So if I have that luxury, I'm just switching to a totally different project. Or I'm just switching to vocals within one project, or I'm just taking another project and I'm doing a little bit of, let's say, vocal editing, or maybe I need to program synths for some other project, I'll do that. Or if I have nothing left for today, I'll probably take my guitar and do some warm-ups to stay in shape or something. But I just, at this point, I know when my brain tells me, hey, I'm going to start spinning in circles right now. You're going to waste 4 hours and get tired.
Yeah.
Like those sleepless nights. And I know that happens at night. So when I feel like, okay, it's almost midnight and I'm still mixing, I'm still having this problem. If I'm sitting after, let's say, 1 p.m., I'm doomed for sleepless nights and not very resultive working hours, and probably a rough morning. So that's, I guess, the thing you're telling me, like when you start just listening and your analytical part gets overheated.
Well, it's when you start switching from the gut reaction to the mental.
Yeah, gut reaction.
Yeah.
But to develop the gut reaction, you gotta spend all those years of all these errors. They gotta accumulate into the gut feeling. Yeah. So to develop the instinct, you are forced to spend all those not very efficient hours. Because as far as I know, any mammal, maybe even any living creature, the best things we memorize are the negative experiences. Positive experience go away very easily, but negatives remain for years. So when you go the wrong way and you have to redo the mix all over again or re-record, you will probably never get there again.
Yeah.
Or at least you will avoid it as much as you can.
Yeah. Well, it's you teach yourself lessons. You get, once you've taken a big lesson or you've made a big mistake or something, then you try not to do that same mistake again. Yeah. That's the best possible thing that you can do to, like, as I say, when I first started out, I spent years and years studying the theory, making sure I knew everything exactly, writing articles, being like, yes, this is 100% the best way to EQ a kick drum or whatever. These are the exact frequencies. But for years, I was afraid to actually apply that stuff because I knew that I was going to screw it up, Whereas if I just started and improved my practical alongside my theory, I would have saved myself a huge amount of time and a lot of emotional stress,
Oh yeah, for me, I think that's where we differ a little bit because in the earlier years, I was so passionate about making music. I wanted to record drums so hard that I built the isolated room within my apartment. Acoustically treated, like isolated floor, isolated ceiling, everything's isolated, and I managed to record drums. I recorded them for 3 years without any problems. The room was small, so there were no reflections, but still. And I remember all those errors regarding tuning, and I was always buying drum heads for the clients, tuning the drum heads, and all the errors were so painful. So when you record and you know that it's off, but you keep recording and then you cannot fix it in the mix.
Yeah.
That's error number 1. Then let's say you tune the drums better this time, but you don't tell the drummer to hit more consistently. And you end up replacing things. That's error number 2. For instance, you set everything up perfectly, but you do not let the snare sit for at least 1 day. And the drummer hits quite hard, and the snare keeps just getting detuned every 3 takes. And you spend probably half of the time tuning the snare. You tune the snare 20 times a day. Error number 3. And all those errors were, in fact, I almost forgot that negative feeling at this moment, but the positive outcome has remained. So the knowledge has remained with me.
You can only learn those things by doing it, you know?
Yes,
you
that's
did
what
it,
I mean.
You made the mistakes, you learn, and those things really, really stick with you. I mean, in terms of...
Exactly.
To the point that now, like, you don't have to even think about those things. They're just like muscle memory to you. You know what the things you have to do. Whereas if you spend years and years just reading articles and stuff, as we mentioned before, they don't talk about the real world problems, the real world random problems that you will face on every session you do. And they're completely unavoidable, and they will happen, and they're random, and it will always be a very, very odd problem, you know. A lot of the time
there's one thing I recalled. We were discussing in the Sneap forum. There was a little thing he wrote that's not so little at all. He told that while recording demos with a simple SM57, one day he realized that he's getting way better results, way nicer tones than using his studio approach, the approach that people were using in the 70s and 80s, using condenser microphones and room microphones and various schemes to capture the sound of the cabinet in the room. He just used a single SM57 and it sounded awesome.
Yeah.
And it resonated with me so much. It was the very first time that I read someone's very valuable opinion that simple things, shortcuts sometimes are better. Sometimes we're overcomplicating things just because we can. We think, okay, I have all those microphones. I gotta capture everything. Maybe I will need another microphone during the mixing stage. I will just capture it to be there. And then you have like 6 or 7 tracks for one guitar. And that is like having 100 kilograms of weight on your ankles and you just cannot walk.
And it's that exact thing applied to everything. So like
everything.
Because when you want options and you want to try everything and you want to make sure you get it right and you want to have every single option available, you apply that same mentality to everything. So then you record the vocalist with 3 mics at the same time, or you go and or you put 3 condenser mics on the snare, or you put an inside mic, an outside mic, plus like a recorder man kind of setup, and tons of different things on the drums. And then you come to mix the drums and you've got 500 channels of drums, you know?
Yeah, but before you do, you have to edit all this shit.
Exactly, yeah. So it's just
that's horrible.
Applying that kind of mentality to every single thing in a mix will result in a huge nightmare of a mix and a huge nightmare of an emotional stress response when you come to open
and
that
now
and work on that project.
Let me give you the opposite picture. Like we're recording a band and we're instantly capturing the tones. So if we set the microphones, if we mic up the kick drum, yes, we may use 3 microphones, but only because we enjoy how it sounds at the moment of recording.
Yeah.
So when recording, we do things that we instantly like, and then we forget it. set and forget. Same with guitar amp. I always capture DIs and I prefer to reamp after the editing because it's better to edit the DI, to time stretch the tails, to work on the DI and then to reamp it.
Yeah.
For me, at least, it's a better option.
And easier,
of course, there are genres,
to see the notes as well.
There are simple genres where you don't really need to edit things that much. In that case, you may just ditch the DI, just get the great amp tone, and you're a happy mixer. But with extreme metal, things are so complicated, even the best players are edited. And especially when you're comping the takes, so let's say you record 4 or 5 takes of rhythm guitars, and on the fly, or maybe later, you want to combine them into 2 perfect takes, left and right. In that case, it's better to do it with the DIs, to glue them together, and to run them through the same exact setup you used when recording. Maybe you will tweak the gain a tiny bit. Maybe you will even automate the volume of the DI depending on the section of the song. So you will probably even do something with the DI in the DAW before it hits the reamping chain. But the thing is, you're getting everything while recording. You're very happy with it. The singer will only have their SM57, and they will probably just hold it because they're used to it. They don't have to stand against the microphones. Imagine the nightmare of the singer who doesn't use headphones, doesn't use the microphone stand. And here is the singer in headphones with 3 microphones, and he shouldn't move the head.
It's a nightmare. It's their first time in the studio. It's a butchered
performance.
You have a great singer. It's their first time in the studio, and their first experience is fear because they've got a whole new setup that they're not used to. They have to stand straight. They have to look up, maybe even like people when they're singing at home, that people just like sing that you're comfortable. You sing comfortably, you know, whereas you come to the studio and they put a microphone up here, you have to sing like this, and that your lyric sheet is over there, and
that's
don't turn too much off axis and all these kind of things. It's like mega fear.
So in my scenario, well, not like my scenario, in the scenario that I practice most, the only thing I ask is not to do this, not to cup the microphone. Everything else, you're free to do. You want to lay down, I'll give you a carpet to lay down. Just do everything you feel comfortable doing. And it comes from my own musical experience. And that's why for every engineer, I encourage every engineer to learn how to sing a little bit. But you gotta just know the singer's experience when the singer puts the headphones on. How everything changes for the singer.
A great example on this exact thing we're talking about that I can give is like I'm sure you'd agree, like when we both first started, I'm sure we were both way more particular and perfectionistic about these things. Like when you're an amateur and you get a band come in, because you've seen people do it on the internet, you've seen the professionals doing it, like, okay, I need to put you in this position, perfect posture, perfect everything, headphones, blah, 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 these kind of things. You think that that's the correct way to do it. But through the years, through the experience, through the things you've learned and the mistakes we've made, it's like you've come to the point now where you, as you say, like as long as they're not cupping the mic and they're comfortable, and I'm going to get the best performance. But a great example on that exact thing is in the songs that we've been doing together recently. So for people watching, I've recently been experimenting a lot with AI for AI vocal replacement. So I can sing. I'm a decent singer. I'm not the best singer. I'm not a huge fan of my voice because I think it's very limited in terms of what I can do with it. It's quite a soft voice, you know, whereas I prefer doing more energetic kind of music. But anyway, when I'm recording the songs for these songs that we've been doing together, the songs that you've been mastering, simply because of the things I've learned and the things about comfort and the things that I know I give the best performance if I'm completely comfortable, you know. I hate personally recording with headphones. I can't do it. You know, if I hear my voice through the headphones, I just can't. I can't pitch. I can't do timing. Nothing. So basically, for the songs that you've mixed, and I haven't told you this yet, but I recorded all of these songs with no backing track, no click, and no point of reference for pitch. I recorded them with nothing, just me singing into the microphone.
Yeah, that's funny.
Which is...
I will tell you my story later.
Yeah. So when I'm recording these songs, literally all I'll do is... And it's literally just a personal preference thing, because I know I just can't... I could probably teach myself to do it, but I prefer to just be comfortable. Like, I sing great when I'm in the shower, or I'm in the kitchen, or I'm just, like, singing, as I said. The comfortable, just singing without a care in the world. That's when I do my best singing. So I like... When it comes to recording, that's the way I like to do it as well. So I'll take off my headphones, I'll have my speakers, I'll just press play, I'll listen to, and just kind of memorize the tempo and the key of the song, make sure I've got the right point of reference, and then I will just record with no click, no backing track, no nothing. And then any problems that occur, I'll just do more takes. But that's just for me, that's the most comfortable way of doing it. That's the way I can get the best performance out of myself.
And just imagine all those singers who are way less studio familiar than you, who are just forced to sing in the studio environment.
Yeah.
They cannot take off their phones and they cannot do all this.
Yeah.
But I had this very similar problem during the first many years of my even performances as a singer. When I started recording our second full-length album, I still had problems singing right with headphones. I even developed a setup. Many people know it, but I mean, many people use it. It's not my initial, not my know-how, but I developed it myself.
Mm-hmm.
I was placing the NS10 speakers.
Oh, the phase reversal.
Yeah, and also I recorded one full take with me just standing in front of the microphone.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just kept it and I was singing the way I wanted. And then I was phase cancelling this muted track to remove even more. And there were no plugins that can do it like now. There are a couple of cool plugins now that can get rid of lots of unwanted ambience in vocals.
Mm-hmm.
Not only room reflections, but also like backing track or live performing band, and you just use that plugin. It removes lots of cymbal spill and amps and everything. But it still wasn't good enough, because I love lots of compression and sometimes I use parallel distortion, and those tracks still sound very dirty.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you have to edit things, when you have to move things around, so you have the vocal performance that you gotta move 1/64th of a note forwards or backwards.
And you have a snare drum
probably
underneath
deal especially the snare, but also it can be everything.
Yeah.
But you gotta have a pristine, clean track. So I learned how to sing using headphones with least discomfort, and I ended up loving recording in headphones. So my first thing was, I'm very lucky to be like some people just cannot record quietly. They need a lot of volume in their headphones. I'm not like that, because I'm trying to preserve my hearing.
Yeah.
So I make music so quiet that I can sing without any microphone being fed into the headphones.
Because you're hearing your natural
only the music
voice as
here.
well.
Then I add a tiny bit of vocals, just enough to hear the sibilance, just enough to hear the brightness. I'm still comfortable. I still hear myself through the bones, through the skull, and through the chest. And another little trick that is just a revelation for some of the singers I record, if there is such an option, of course, you flip the polarity on the mic preamp or on the monitoring chain. What it does in this environment, when your vocals that you hear through your bone and the vocals you hear through your microphone are relatively equal in loudness, when it flips the phase, it changes the frequency response of what you're hearing dramatically. In one setting, it's usually very thin and hollow, and on another one, it boosts all those vocal frequencies. And you finally hear yourself in the most pleasing way.
Yeah.
It's least abrasive, it's very full, it's very smooth, and it doesn't sound alien to you. It sounds the way you hear yourself when you're talking. And that finally gave me the comfort. And just after a few sessions, I felt very confident when singing. And that's when I probably had one of the biggest boosts in recording my vocals. And as a singer, I started growing quite fast because I started enjoying recording myself. And with that came better understanding of how I intonate, of my timing and things like that. So yeah, there's that. There's a little trick I'd love to share with everyone who's interested in recording vocals.
No, and that is a very, very interesting trick. It's the thing that you wouldn't really think about, but just like the combination of the actual vocal coming from your headphones and the vocal you're hearing in your body, you know, from the actual acoustics of your body and the physical resonations. Like, that's crazy. But the funny thing I find is, like, I think we both agree, I think you'd agree, like, it's so much more important, the things you're talking about now, the comfort and the facilitation of a good performance is so much more important than the microphone you're using or the acoustics or any of that stuff. It's just, I don't...
Exactly.
Years ago, I would have cared way more about that stuff. I did care more about that stuff. But these days, I'm just like, I know, like, nothing's going to fix a bad performance, even if it's the best recorded bad performance, you know?
Yeah, and the bad performance is not always like just out of tune performance. Bad performance is the empty performance that has nothing. You can notice that the musician or the singer were not thinking about, not feeling the song. They were not enjoying they were not trying to make art. They were thinking about, the headphones, I can feel my eyes, where should I look to see the lyrics? The microphone is scary. What does the engineer think about me at the moment? Maybe he thinks I'm dumb, you know? All those things translated in music. So yes, and by the way, you really do not need the best gear to sound great anyway. You just need, I don't know, necessary minimum. Everything else is the comfort and things like that.
It's cliche to say this stuff, you know, when you say like, gear doesn't matter or things doesn't matter, the performance matters. It's such cliche, but it's true. It's so incredibly true. Like, you can think of any of your favorite songs from the 60s or the 70s. I don't care at all. Literally, like, completely honestly, I don't care at all about the sonics. Like, a lot of them are mixed really well, luckily, or they've been remastered and they sound really great these days, but I don't care. You know, I care about the song, I care about the voice, I care about the emotion, which is
especially with the classic rock music. And by classic rock music, I even mean the 90s. And right now, with proper knowledge, we can replicate certain signature tones. We do not need a super fancy preamp after the SM57 to put it against the Vintage 30 speaker. But the playing, that's the crucial thing. Because I received loads of amazing DIs recorded into Scarlett without any DI box. And I could just reamp them instantly. They sounded great because the guitarist was good, and
because they're picking hard and they're playing the parts fluidly, or they're getting the emotion. You can hear the emotion in the picking, you know.
Yes, and vice versa. I also remember I used to mix a French band. They just recorded one song, and I never heard anything new from them, unfortunately, because it was so much fun, and it was just theme for rock. Very smooth music, and the singer probably recorded, I don't know, maybe in the kitchen maybe. It was one of the worst source tracks, but she was so passionate, and that nice little French accent. It was so much fun to mix, and we ended up with great results. After lots of surgical EQ, and I tried to remove the reverb, and I covered the remaining reverb in different reverb and in delay, and there were certain things where I was just finding solutions, but she was so great in that song that it really didn't matter.
We
tend to forget how that regular people, they do not really care about studio purist, elitist stuff. In fact, sometimes they despise it.
Yeah.
Sometimes they say, we love the live version more. It has more energy. Some people prefer bootlegs that are even more underground in terms of how they are recorded and mixed.
We overemphasize, we put an overimportance on these things. I mean, if you have a fantastic song and a fantastic performance, I think that's like 80% of the thing is that, you know. The remaining 20% is the small details, and it can improve it, but if they're not there, you're still going to like that song at 80%.
At the same time, it's important to stress on the fact that we are right now in the position of perfectionists who are trying to rehab.
Yeah.
If you're not like that, forget everything we said.
But I think the thing is, there is no correct way of teaching that to people. You know, it's kind of like a reassurance. You can just say, "Don't worry, you will get to the point where you will understand things in a more kind of mature way." Let's say,
and let your brain form all the new networks, all the new neuron connections, and you will get there anyway. But of course, your process of trial and error, process of learning, will take a few years, and you will be the perfectionist in one way or another. You will, in any case, one day you will encounter a situation where you'll deal with your own perfectionism, and you will try to find it, and in the end you will defeat it, and you will speak the way we speak right now.
If you've been doing this for 10 years, 20 years, however many years, you can't explain your mentality, and they can just be like, "Oh, okay, I'm going to do that from now on. I'm not going to overthink." It just doesn't work. I don't think there is any possible combination of words that we can use to explain this concept to someone who's just
it's like keep calm and keep mixing.
Yeah.
In any case,
you just need to do it. You just need to do it. There is no other explanation. You know.
What I mean is that on one side, you gotta always know when it's good enough, and when you just gotta stop and get the thing released.
Yes.
On the other hand, for many people, it might be the wrong message, because many people will think that they shouldn't try hard enough. And many years, any engineer, first few years, you got to try extremely hard, because the clients will be less experienced, the gear will be worse.
You'll have more problems.
We're talking about it. Gear doesn't matter, but if it's a horrible room and a microphone that's placed in the wrong way, that's the wrong gear I'm talking about. The environment, let's call it environment, let's call it conditions in which you're recording. It will take years, and then when you earn this experience, when you finally build this huge tree of neuron connections within your brain, that's when it's time to say gear doesn't matter, and you should not be perfectionist. But first you gotta study a lot of things. The way AI learns things right now, you know, like the first results it shows are very funny and clumsy and primitive and funny errors. But each year it gets better and better, better. That's basically us learning our calling.
You need to understand the standard you're aiming for. Gear no longer matters as long as you are sure that the thing that you're capturing is good enough, you know? But that's the thing that comes with experience. It's years and years of trying
to... Knowing the good enough thing
takes years. Because, like, someone will send me a song, someone will send me a demo that they want to record, want us to improve or edit, you know, the lyrics and stuff. And I'm like, oh gosh, this is terrible. How did this person put these words together as lyrics and think that they were good? They can listen to a song on the radio that is produced by the best producers in the world. They can listen to a song that is, the lyrics are written by Max Martin, for example, not Max Morton.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, your evil pop twin. They can listen to that stuff on the radio all day, but they don't understand what makes it good, what makes it professional, what makes it work, you know? There's a difference between just listening to it. You can listen to that stuff and then you go and write your own song and the lyrics are horrible, really, really cringy, you know?
I recalled my earliest experience as the engineer. That was very frustrating, but I think it was important for me to get that lesson early on. I probably was 14 years old, and it means it was somewhere around 1998.
Mm-hmm.
So you had no plugins back then. You had nothing like that. And at that point, I was already recording some demos using a cassette, a tape recorder, very, very primitive recordings. I only had acoustic guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And with all that, I used my stepfather's computer with the sound card that only had wave synthesis. Do you remember those 8-bit sounds it could produce? It could record some audio. And I used Cakewalk 8 DW. So it was, and again, late 90s, but you could already edit things. You could move the timings, so you could probably do lots of things you can do now, but much slower. Maybe not tuning, but definitely quantizing drums, quantizing guitars, and everything like that. And I tried to record a song, so I was already composing something, and I tried to record the song. And I had that. My first feelings, initial feelings, were like, okay, I will just record the song; it will be awesome. And I recorded the song, and it sucked so hard. I felt like, how can someone, it's so complicated and it's just impossible to do. It's just impossible. For me, I just realized how impossible the path was that was lying in front of me. And I guess that was the first time I heard Black Sabbath, maybe Iron Maiden, and I wanted to record something like that. And obviously I could not. But that first early frustration was very important for me because I had to make a decision back then. Do I continue or do I just decide, like, any teenager, it's not for me. I'll just keep listening to metal because I like metal, but making music is not for me. But I did not stop, and it just kept becoming better year by year. And I was very lucky to live in the early age of digital revolution, when things were still very scarce and you had that hunger within you, because it was very magical to find something I had dial-up connection, and I was downloading an MP3 of some bootleg for a few hours to enjoy it later. And there were sound fonts for Sound Blaster, early way to program your own sample library.
Okay.
And I was just getting little pieces of drum performances from the albums I loved, I slide them into hits, and I made my own sound fonts to like, imagine Cozy Powell playing with you on drums.
So you were just finding, like,
it was magic.
Individual hits that didn't really have any like guitar or bass on them. I did a similar kind of thing.
And right now you don't have to do that because you have Get-A-Good drums and Bogren Cream drums and Easy Drummer and Superior Drummer and Slade drums. You have everything. And back then I had no amp seams and I had no amps, so I was recording my acoustic guitar using a very cheap microphone that I put it inside the guitar, so it was already distorting quite hard. Gosh. Then I used a function called +6 dB, and I was abusing that function until it started sounding really dirty. And then I just removed all the top end, and it was my amp seam. So what I mean is that sometimes that hunger makes you more motivated. But at the same time, I was very lucky to get all the new things that started happening just a few years later. Otherwise, I'd probably be one of those sad metalheads who had undeveloped taste. We had those in the USSR. They just had no access to quality equipment and quality guitars. That's why they just could not develop the understanding of how to play and how to sound right. And it was quite, sometimes devastating to me to see all those talents wasted. So I was in between those earlier metal enthusiasts and younger people who had access to all those amazing plugins and processors and technology that makes our lives so much easier now.
Yeah. No, it's as I say, like, it's just a thing of like you can't bypass the learning process. You can't. Like, that's what I tried to do when I first started. I tried to bypass the practical learning experience of having to make mistakes and having to make crappy mixes and crappy sounds, crappy guitar tones, terrible snare sounds. But you can't bypass it. I think, like, which is the thing, like we were talking about, but like you can have, there's great, incredible websites and incredible courses now. You can watch CLA, Chris O'Dalgy mixing a song. Like, how amazing is that?
What else do you need? What else do you need?
Exactly, as if that is going to help you mix well. But you have all this amazing information, but it's just not a substitute for just, you have to. Everyone's gone through their process of doing really stupid things for years. You know, like you say, like making your own electric guitar amp sim out of like EQs exactly. and distorting a plugin or whatever. You know, like
and also working with clients. That's a totally different story. I guess we'll cover it in one.
When you put people
future,
into the equation, everything you know just gets completely deleted.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought that also my earlier experience with clients were pretty. Those were funny life stories, man. I mean, like, I had to record opera vocals for a female singer because she could not, and we just were waiting for the guys to go and have a smoke, and she was sitting in a room with me, and I told her, just be quiet now. And I sang the falsetto parts for her and put lots of reverb on it. And the guys returned and I said, okay, we're done with vocals for today.
Wow.
Here are the vocals. And also I remember like earlier clients were sitting in my studio for too long. I mean, we were abusing my personal time because they could not really play, and I was gathering their parts from little pieces for no reason. I mean, there was no reason to do it, but I thought it was right because, hey, they are the musicians, so they got to record it. And then they were calling me at night, drunk, asking for some revisions. No one knows why. And I mean, you got to go through all these experiences as the mix engineer.
Yeah.
Most of those experiences, you got to go through them to never return to them, to never encounter them. So right now, the person just writes you, hello, Max, I want to mix a song. And I'm like, red light, alarm, eject. And that's all those negative experiences you had before.
Yeah. It's a checklist. Once every mixing engineer has a checklist of things of bad life lessons that they have to learn.
Yeah.
And once you've learned all of them, and we probably still haven't learned all of them, by the way. There are probably There are probably a couple of really bad things that are going to happen to us in the future in terms of clients. But
I like thinking of Andy Wallace when I'm thinking about my age and about my expertise and about how many decades of music I have left. I'm thinking of him or of George Martin. Who was producing Celine Dion and many others until he was quite of an age. So I think that our experiences will grow together with us. There are also great composers who are still active in their 80s. That means they have stories to tell.
You have to go through that stuff and experience it to truly learn lessons and not make the same mistakes again. I mean, it's cliche stuff, but it's true, you know. It's hard to explain because it's cliche stuff. Everyone's saying this, but you got to feel the message. The thing is, it doesn't mean a lot to someone who's just starting out when you say these kind of big grand concepts of you just have to learn and you just have to to make mistakes and stuff. And that's not what they want to hear. They want to hear, I have to EQ a snare and boost it at 200 hertz, or that's the stuff they want to hear. They want to hear definitive answers, perfect answers to the questions they have in their head. Of course, there are those chains that are working really well that I guess everyone should use as a starting point. But you got to earn it by
trial and error. I don't mean that you gotta suffer, no, but before taking something useful for granted, you gotta deeply understand why you stop there.
Yeah.
So if you choose to always use the SSL channel on the snare, you gotta make sure that you have a reason to do that. Because maybe you're in totally different genre. Maybe you want to do stoner music, and then my pristine approach to mixing things, because I love pristine tones. I like things being tidy. Even when they're dirty, they're still kind of tidy in my understanding. So maybe you're a totally different person. It's like the concepts of the mix bus. Some people love it with a slow attack, like myself, and everything below 30 milliseconds is fast for me. I tried 10, I don't like it.
I'm the same. Yeah, I don't like 10 or 5. Some people use 1.
Yeah. 1. Remember Nolly? I tried it when I'm following him in his session, when I'm just following him, it works. When I try it on my mix, it never works.
But it's because it's a combination. It's because Nolly is making his snares and his kicks too transient in the mix, and then compensating by making the mix bus faster. But that is the thing of, like, if someone who doesn't really understand what I've just said there, they have a completely different mix where they don't have enough transient, they don't have enough attack on their snare, and then they see Nolly using a 1 millisecond attack on his SSL bus comp, and then they go and say, oh, Nolly's doing that, so I'm going to do that. You've now got an extremely dead snare in your mix, because you didn't have enough attack, and now you're reducing it even more with your bus comp. And so that's the kind of stuff, those are the kind of mistakes I would have made when I first started out, not understanding, seeing the full picture, just seeing, oh, Nolly uses a 1 millisecond attack on his bus compressor, so I'm going to do that. And then you just have a Frankenstein of a mix where you're using tips from 100 different engineers on every single instrument, but you're not understanding why each of those decisions was made and how they work together.
I just thought you were telling about the Frankenstein of a mix that some of the younger engineers are doomed to have because they have just begun their journey in the engineering world and they have all those different examples. And then I thought that we have never experienced the generation of engineers who learned engineering exactly like they do now. It's a relatively new thing, that amount of great quality information and tools. So maybe in 5 to 10 years, we'll probably witness another, if not revolution, maybe evolution of how things sound. That's. I just realized that, again, we have our experience, but our perspective is also very limited because of that experience. Because we are not these younger engineers who only whose foundation is very different from ours.
If me and you were to start again from scratch now, I'm sure in 10 years' time, the mixes we produce would sound, and the songs we produce would sound completely different to what you have actually ended up sounding like now. Like, it's just like, and you probably would have sounded completely different if you'd started 30 years ago or 40 years ago. It's just a...
Yes, absolutely.
So the way you learn and the tools and the plugins that you have at your disposal will absolutely 100% influence the way your overall sound develops,
The only thing, I think, that is really crucial for everyone, doesn't matter of their age and their background, we gotta stay away from prejudice. So there are certain myths and legends, and never EQ more than 3 dB if we're talking like engineering language, or anything really. That's why we gotta always try it and experience it on our own, because sometimes you can live for tens of years, for decades, with some myth in your head that you have never tested. It's very important to reevaluate certain things that you are... Like, I remember one person commenting on my first EP, well, everything's good, songs are good, but guitars suck because they are in front of the drums. And it was nobody, it was a nameless guy. but it hit me in a way, and I didn't analyze that it hit me. And since then, for many years, I tried to control that the guitars are slightly behind the drums.
Who decides? Who decides whether
exactly?
the drums... Who
and then I realized that there are
you know?
so many fantastic recordings where guitars are in front of the drums, or let's say a bass is in front of the drums. In fact, it was a stupid thing to say, and it was even more stupid of me to believe it and to not analyze it, just take it for granted. Sometimes it happens with you no matter how critical you are. So yeah, I just wanted to say that because I know that so many people really suffer of it.
No, there are, that's incredibly important, because there are, you could spend an hour on YouTube in the comment section and you could find a million examples of that same thing. The vocal has been compressed by more than 5 dB, you know? You shouldn't compress the vocal more than 5 dBs. You shouldn't distort vocal, whatever. There's literally, you could come up with a million different stupid rules, like according to who? According to who?
Exactly. And one example I would like to include here is when I was making the Nail the Mix session with Jinjer, some people who made the contest mixes, some students, sent the mixes with sample replaced drum that was super deep and like classic metal modern drum, machine gunish. And because they hated the initial drum, and many people actually didn't like the snare drum on that recording. But the thing is that the drummer was searching for his signature sound that got completely shaped on the next recording.
I can hear the snare in my head when you say it. You know, I can hear the exact snare that you're talking about in my head when you're saying it, because it's unique and it sticks out and it's memorable.
And he wanted that sound. So our aim when we are engineering things, as engineers, should consider that the artist's vision, we got to be the tool for the artist to implement their vision.
Yes.
So everyone who made that deep sampled snare, he said, I'm sorry, like, F you client, F you performer. I know better, I'm the engineer. That's how the snare should sound. That's the wrong mindset.
Yeah. Well, it's the thing of like, there's nothing wrong with those shotgun snare sounds. I love them. I mean, I love those drum sounds.
Yeah.
But
I do a lot of them.
The thing is, if you went ahead and you played me 10 different songs by 10 different bands that all had the same drum sounds, you might be able to tell from the performance. You might be able to, but from the drum sound, I couldn't tell which drummer is which drummer, because there's nothing particularly, like, if I say like Korn to you, or I say Deftones to you, or I say Def Leppard to you, you can recognize those drummers and the bands from the sound of the drums, not just the performance, from the sound of the drums as well. So it is a part of the unique imprint, it's the tone of the drummer.
And not just the drums, but if we just take one mix element, we'll find huge sonic differences that might sound weird for a person who is not familiar with the genre, or who's been listening exclusively to the modern metal productions. That might sound horrible for them. I've been analyzing machine gun snares from the 80s and, well, long forgotten snares from the 80s, because that's what I was listening when I was a teenager. But I forgot how it sounded, and I returned to that not a while ago. And it was a revelation for me, because all those machine gun snares sounded differently. Well, let's take any drummer from the 80s. That snare would sound different than Def Leppard's snare, and it would sound different than Genesis snare. Or any CLA mixed snare would sound different from another band's snare. And they were even using the same tools. They were using that gated reverb, for instance, right? It would still sound different. Cozy Powell, I wanted to name Cozy Powell with Sabbath. His extremely hard, similar hits sounded very differently than, let's say, I don't know, any pop recording that had the same huge snare that we visualize as the 80s exaggerated over-the-top reverb snare.
It's still...
But right now...
Yeah, it's nowhere near as exaggerated as it is nowadays, is what you're saying.
Yeah, in a way. But right now, somehow we all gravitate towards very similar results.
Yeah.
Not only in music production, unfortunately, but in everything around us. I've been driving around the city today and I just saw another car, modern car. And although those cars are better, they're safer, they are more efficient, they are faster, and this and that. And some of them are beautiful cars, but they look alike way more than they used before.
Yeah.
And same, even I would probably say same with the movies. You got to search for a specific director who would have very strong visual cinematic language. Maybe it's less obvious in the movies, but still, we are one huge melting pot, and at this point, we turn into one substance. There are no parts in this soup anymore, just one. Yeah. We're not even in a melting pot, we're probably in a blender or something. That's why I really love the records that stick out of this soup.
It's not, as we said before, there's no such thing as right or wrong, and it's not to say that there's anything wrong with drum samples or anything like that. I like those sounds for the right mix, the right drum samples, everything. It can sound amazing, like a huge wall of sound that just beats you over the head. But
I love it.
It's the thing of there isn't as much originality in terms of recognizing who the drummer is from their snare sound, or recognizing who the guitarist is from their unique guitar sound. And I think that's the Jinjer stuff is a good example. On the snare sound, it is unconventional, but it's extremely memorable. Or the guitar sounds. You didn't use a Fender
something, I forgot
Supersonic
already.
Or something.
The amp. Yeah, it's completely non-metal. You cannot use it without the pedal in front of it. It just sounds messy and dirty, and it's loud. It's painfully loud. But with a pedal and with very thick strings, and I personally prefer thinner strings, but Roman loves thick strings. It sounds dirty and gnarly, and it just works perfectly for them.
Yeah, it's a different approach. It's an approach of you're trying to cultivate an original, unique sound rather than.
I loved when they said we don't really care if it sounds wrong.
Yeah.
We don't care if it doesn't sound like any other record. We just want our thing, and we have our thing in mind. And they rehearse and play live more than they're listening to any studio thing. So they are a live band. And what they do live on rehearsals and on the stage defines their vision, defines how they understand their tone, what they want to sound in the studio. And that's better, that's closer to the real band. And I apologize for sounding like a purist. I love sampled drums, I love modern productions, and I do that a lot. What I mean is that maybe that is one of the causes we have a crisis these days. A creative crisis, problems with monetization and things like that. Because even though people love modern bands, I guess it's harder to be a fan of, let's say, an album.
No, I agree.
It's harder to create the album like Pink Floyd The Wall, or I don't know, Nirvana. I'm not a huge fan of Nirvana, but one of those bands that had a signature sound and signature songwriting imprint and vocal tone, right?
I agree. I really love, and I'm impressed by a lot of the modern mixes. The more kind of wall of sound approach to just everything's huge, but it doesn't stick with me as much. It really doesn't.
Yes, exactly. So, and every time some band has a little something, a little special,
Something
it's
messed
like
up.
a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, something
like
is
a breath
messed
of
up.
fresh air. You don't need everything fresh. Just give me something little, like maybe even some dissonance. For instance, a very smooth female vocal, but super deep guitars and very dirty sound, or something like that.
Yeah.
Just something like that. Or maybe a singer who's very smooth in his clean vocals, almost female-like, but can growl really deep. Even that, but it's still a crisis.
Yeah.
And we are not guilty, but that's how we... I mean, it's very hard to create a revolutionary recording when everyone's used to very specific set of tones. And when you go beyond the border, everyone's like, it sounds wrong, it sounds nasty, that snare is wrong, the guitar is wrong, the thing sounds too dull or too bright. At the same time, those people will probably listen to the Beatles classic recordings when the whole drum kit is on the right and the whole bass is on the left. And that's okay. Somehow those songs are still very enjoyable.
Yeah, it's
extremely enjoyable.
I think it's partially the whole fact that the production has become maybe exaggerated to the point that it's overemphasized. People worry about it too much, so they're relying on it too much. They're like, it needs to sound like this, but like it's not so much about the song. I mean, there are some very good songs, of course. I'm not... It's like we say, we don't want to sound like... I'm not even that old, but I sound old when I say this stuff.
Yeah, we sound like two old farts right now.
No, I like a lot of the music. It's just an overemphasis on the sound and the production versus the song. If you get rid of all of the production to its bare basics, does the song hold up? Is the song as good as the Beatles playing in a room with none of those techniques?
I think I can articulate what I mean, what my aims are saying all this. I'd love to use all the modern tools and all the modern approaches and all the modern like everything modern that exists now. But I'd love to find a new way to make the recordings sound interesting and original. And I haven't yet. Maybe I won't. But at least I want to try. I'd really love to, because it's so tempting to use, as I said before, to use all those 100% working solutions.
It's
easy. And at the same time, you gotta use all those tools wisely, but you gotta remain creative and find the sauce. Sometimes find the new ingredient, find the chemistry. What is the chemistry of the project? If this project is worth finding something special, if there is something special, if there is a hidden gem in the project you're working on, you gotta try to find it and emphasize it and make it a center of your mix. So otherwise, you'll probably ruin the song. Being a great mixer with all those great tools, with what snare blends well, what snare sample blends well with the live snare to make it instantly sound right. But that might be the opposite thing for the exact band you're working on.
No, yeah, I agree 100%. I think when I downloaded the multi-tracks for the Jinjer song, the first thing I probably did is replace the snare. Sorry.
No,
when I was just playing with it. But it's just I didn't even think about it. Now that we're talking about it, I didn't even think about it. I just thought, I always just replace the snare. I always just replace the kick. So it's just a thing of, it's become too easy, and again, it's not to say that these things are wrong. They sound great. You do whatever. You need to do whatever fits the project you're working on, whatever works best for the vision, right? But it has become somewhat automatic with me. Like it's like you say, most of the time we'll go for a 5150 or a dual rectifier for guitars. We'll go for a dark glass on the bass. We'll go for a big shotgun snare on the... It's an automatic thing. I didn't even think about that, to do with that particular song. But the first thing I noticed when the song was released was the snare. When that song was first released and you sent it to me, the first thing I noticed was, that's an interesting snare sound. I haven't heard that in a while. A natural kind of pingy kind of somewhat piccolo kind of snare sound, which sounds like old Korn or Deftones or something. I haven't heard that in years, and which is interesting, you know?
Yeah, and we improved it in macro, it was a piccolo-ish snare, but in Wallflowers it was also very high-tuned snare, but somehow it sounded even more not even more, it sounded more organic. It sounded organic with the mix. We found the formula that sounded, the whole record sounded very analog because there was almost no mixing going on. Most of the tones we used, we found during the recording stage.
Which is amazing.
So almost no EQ on anything, really. And that's how mostly it was summing, plus of course a few plugins here and there, a decapitator somewhere, like a multiband compressor somewhere, reverbs, delays. But what I mean is that all the heavy lifting was done during the tracking. And although I know that Jinjer Wallflowers album is not how many bands would like to sound, I mean that there are those countless possibilities that we as engineers have during tracking make our lives, not only make our lives easier during mixing, because if you agree with the band that these are the tones we love, then you're not on the crossroads when you're mixing. You have the point A and point B, and you just move from point A to point B.
When you were making those decisions to go with some more, let's say, unconventional or different from the current kind of mainstream way of doing things, when you were making a conscious decision to do that with the band, was there any doubt or fear in your mind about what people would think about it?
At that point, none whatsoever, because I read lots of comments about Macro, about the previous album.
About Macro, then, for example, when you were doing it for Macro.
Yeah, I did because I felt like the guys want to experiment, but during the mixing stage, they might say, you know what, it doesn't work. Let's do something with it, and it would be fine. We would probably do a lot of sample blending and reamping and everything, and it will be great. It would be great. It would end up as a different album. But I'm very happy that we made that unfinalized effort with Macro, and they're still happy, and I'm still happy with the album. We could not do more. We needed that step to move further, and it's great if it would be the weight that we would not lift, just it was too hard for us, let's drop it and let's just remain conventional and traditional in understanding of how modern recordings sound.
Yeah.
We would have no Wallflowers, and we would not probably have the next album we're planning to record in 2024.
But it's creatively extremely fulfilling, probably, to just do what you want to do instead of.
Yes, and it felt like a solution. I'm taking a break as a musician, not as a musician, but as a composer for my own project. Maybe in a few years I will try again, and I want to make it bigger, and I want to succeed. But what I really want to do, I want to avoid all those temptations that I have as the engineer, okay, let's edit things a little more. Let's go with working schemes. And I want that mix-ready tones when recording, because what's the biggest fun for me is that I used, with all those beginner clients early on in my career, that recording and mixing is very complicated, because all those source tracks are so horrible. You gotta edit things to death, and then you gotta detect all the samples precisely, because the drummer is so weak that any triggers won't detect them precisely. So you gotta go through each hit for sample blending. And if he's super bad, you just don't care anymore. You leave the cymbals and you hope that it won't flam too much.
Yeah.
So you do all those life-sucking things. And then you end up with the result you're not really proud of because it's impossible to make it sound great.
It's just, all that effort.
And that
for what?
becomes your habit. You treat every mix like that because you haven't reevaluated it in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And the best cure is to just create a great mix-ready tone. And here you are prepared. You know that you'll play on time, you'll intonate well, you'll just make a few takes and it will be your song. And then you will mix it for a few hours and it will be ready for release. There's no bigger joy for the engineer. And there were times in the history of mankind when the records were made like that. I do not mean that we should return to the past, but the same thing as in other forms of art, somehow people enjoy classic art, classic music, or let's say classic cars, or classic movies. There are so many things we really enjoy because with time we understand how beautiful they were in the context of our modern world. It's not that they were better, but they are different and we cannot recreate it now. Even if we take, let's say we take film, we take analog cameras and we shoot the movie, it still doesn't look like 70s. And there are so many bands that go to the studio and they record like in the 70s and they still do not sound like in the 70s. Those are different people with living different lives in a different... That's what they call zeitgeist, I think. Like the imprint of time in a certain piece of art or a certain thing that is so precious, so valuable. And what we can learn from our past is this spontaneous ability to record things spontaneously on the fly. Here's the tape, it's rolling, you cannot control anything, just grab the instrument and play it.
Yeah.
And that will be captured and then it will be sold in millions and you will become a history. And that's a beautiful feeling that we have almost lost today when someone enters the studio. They're expecting us to create, like to record short takes and to combine it into performances because that's better, but it's not better.
It's not even about the gear or the technology or anything. It's when you go back to the old days, it's about the fact that because there wasn't the internet, there wasn't as much information available to people. There wasn't, and because of the way that the families work, because of the way that culture worked back in the day, and people just went out to regular jobs and 9 to 5, and everything was just a bit more simple, you know. You apply all of that to musicians going into the studio, and they just got on with it. You just go into the studio, okay, we're recording a song. They didn't overthink. They didn't have all of the overthinking and all of the excess of information that has built up over the last 20, 30 years of the internet that we have, you know? So they didn't even consider overthinking, I don't think. A lot of them, they just got on with it.
Their brains
they were different.
Were not wired to hear editing.
No, they weren't.
They didn't hear quantization.
Yes. They'd never heard like perfect.
They
like,
never saw the music
tapes.
as waveforms.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And also, like, I remember I heard a little piece of Iron Maiden's song. I think it was The Trooper. And I thought, oh my, such a great song. I want to listen it right now. So I turned on The Trooper and the first thing I heard is that bass is all over the place.
Yes,
it's just
it is.
No dynamics, no timing, just... But Steve Harris is like the monster bass player, one of the icons of bass player and one of the faces of Iron Maiden, who is probably even more Iron Maiden than any of their singers.
Yeah.
And Iron Maiden are great, one of the most successful metal bands even now. And it proves that the objective truth lies beyond anyone's understanding of the subject. So as engineers, we have one understanding of the subject. Musicians have another understanding that is somehow similar to ours, but it does not completely match. And then you have the fans, and then you have regular people who are just listening music casually. They have entirely different understanding. And I think the greatest producers, like Rick Rubin, for instance, they have that connection. They cover everything. They are the producers who understand musicians and feel musicians and know how to communicate with musicians, but they also feel the casual listener and the fan.
I've seen on the internet, a lot of people will talk crap about Rick Rubin, saying he doesn't do anything. But that's exactly what makes him a better producer. The thing that he's not doing is overthinking and overcomplicating things. He is approaching the project as he understands, as you say, he understands the musicians, he understands dynamics of how musicians work well together, but above all else, he understands being a music listener, which is essentially the best producer you can possibly have is someone who, like we were talking about earlier, someone who understands the concept of what good enough means, truly. He knows what good enough is. He knows what objective good is in terms of music. Regardless of genre, he can be talking about pop, metal, whatever. He just knows what good is, you know?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
he doesn't overcomplicate things. He approaches it as a listener, you know?
Yeah, he's like the, Eastern martial arts master,
like a guru
who does one little move and
sensei.
The opponent falls. And I mean, like, he's been everywhere. Just today I was surfing the web and I found the little video. Oh, it was Scott's Bass Lessons, great YouTube channel. And the video was about Flea recording Give It Away Now. And there was Rick sitting there near him when he was playing that part with pauses and with lots of air in between notes. And Rick was just supporting him right when he was tracking it. He was giving him the correct advice. And if it was the wrong producer, the song might have been ruined. Easily. I mean, easily. If you watch that video, you realize that there's probably one person in a million who could do it like that. Not standing in the way of the artist. And again, Rick Rubin doesn't produce, I guess, he doesn't produce rookies, he doesn't produce bad musicians, he produces great bands who know their stuff. He doesn't get in their way, but he supports them each time they catch the flow. So he's the quality control.
Yes, and he facilitates the best circumstances for the particular band. For example, like he wouldn't record every band live in the studio, but with the Chili Peppers, that's the way that that's their vibe. They're a live band, they vibe off each other. Chad Smith and Flea vibe, John Frusciante has to go crazy. You can't get John Frusciante to sit in front of Pro Tools and turn on a click and get him to record perfect takes. It wouldn't work,
Yeah, and delete each take because it's not perfectly in time, with the click.
Listen to any single one of John Frusciante's solos. They're out of time, they're out of tune, but they're flipping amazing. So
yeah, exactly. And also time and tuning, that's the concept I haven't understood for probably the first 10 or even 15 years of my music journey, is that intonation should not be perfect, same as timing. That the right intonation, okay, when you're working with a singer who does not intonate properly and you got to tune him, tune them. Or let's say you're working on the electronic track and all the synths are precisely in tune. Some of them are not, by the way. But let's say it's a precisely intonating arrangement. Then probably, yes, you got to tune it tighter. But in general, if we're talking about live band, mostly it will be sharp notes. Bass will be sharp, guitar mutes will be sharp. So the singer should be sharp. And we're doing it wrong if we were just, tuning everything at zero.
Yeah.
It's going to be +10 something.
Mm.
You got to learn to hear intonation. And again, it's not the old school thing I'm explaining right now. I'm not talking from the position of some elitist who just loves old music.
Yeah.
I mean that those things, we are very lucky that we used to enjoy, and we still enjoy all those classic rock songs, because they have taught us there is so much difference between classic rock and modern recordings, modern metal and rock recordings, that all the spectrum we've heard through the years helps us understand what's wrong and what's right in modern day recordings, especially with the bands that are more of the beginner bands, and you got to work with them in the studio to help them get better performances and also edit them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say if it's a metalcore band, of course you will quantize them. Of course you will hard tune them.
Mm-hmm.
Of course you will hard tune the bass, and you'll probably also program the bass in certain times. But if it's your only approach, then you're limiting yourself greatly, because there are also other, let's say, pop bands like Nickelback. By pop, I mean like popular, not underground bands, not black metal, not like popular bands that are playing rock music. And that approach will not work with them, because you cannot even tune vocals that are that harsh.
Yeah.
No program will understand that, and you got to be ready for that.
No, I agree. It's about learning to approach the specific band, the specific genre, the specific song, the way it naturally needs to be approached. You know, it's not about just imposing anything on anything. You know,
yeah, exactly.
Which is, I think, Rick Rubin is the perfect example of that. He finds the unique selling point, the unique element of whoever he's working with, and he facilitates boosting that to maximum. You know, just take whatever's the best thing about the unique thing about that band and just maximize it in whatever way necessary.
Again, we're talking about top dollar productions when they have a huge team of people working on it. It's like mix engineer, master engineer, producer, technical engineer, arranger, some assistant who will compile the tracks into stems for the mix engineer, because probably like CLA has the analog gear, has that board, and he has probably like, I don't know, maybe 64 channels, maybe 48 channels. He will not deal with all those little tracks that only have one little blip on them, because the synth arrangement is very rich and big. Probably someone will edit it for him. So what I mean is that people on the budget like us will have to be the jacks of all trades.
Yeah.
At the same time, we have no luxury of being masters of none. We got to be good. At the same time, we got to do A, working with bands, diplomacy, B, management, like money and timing and everything. C, recording the band in the studio technically, which means you got to sit with the guitarist, help him tune guitar, like mute the unwanted strings, set up the bass, set up the drums, maybe, you know, do all that stuff. Then editing engineers. Then after all this, when you already hate the song and you're tired of the song, you have to
mix
find
it objectively
capacity to mix it and to tolerate all the revisions from the band. Then finally you got to be able to still remain more or less adequate and objective to compare the song with other commercial releases, to make sure that it's not too weird, not too off after everything you've done to the song. That's why I always encourage every mixing engineer, as soon as you can, find a great assistant, not just an experienced person, not at all. I mean, there are people who enjoy editing more than mixing. There are such people. It may sound weird for some of us, but there are. It's like we've been talking before filming this, that you prefer songwriting to mixing, while I prefer mixing to everything else.
Yeah.
So there are people who prefer recording drums. There are people who prefer editing vocals. There are almost no such people because editing vocals is such a specific thing, but they are somewhere there.
Yeah.
So as soon as you find the thing you hate the most, find the person who loves it the most.
Yeah. Some more amateurs, people who are new to the business might think, I can't afford to hire an editor. Well, you can find somewhere, one way, maybe you can trade, you can trade services and just like...
Absolutely,
for example, me and you, like I am a mixing engineer. I've mixed lots of stuff. I've mixed stuff that's been successful, I know that people like my mixes, but I don't. I like mixing, but I know that I get into a certain mindset when I mix. I overthink. Therefore, I'd much rather... focus on my songwriting, focus on my production, and hand it over to you and let you make those decisions. Because I know that you're going to look at it objectively. You're going to see things and hear things that I haven't heard because I've listened to the song so many times. And I know that if you spend 2 hours on a mix, it'll still be a good mix because I trust in your ability and I trust that you absolutely love mixing. And it's just what comes the most natural to you. So we're working off with each other to get the best results. And
yeah, exactly. I just wanted to say that also, that when you send me the tracks, it's usually even not just pure mixing, but more like stem mastering. So you contribute to the tracks in a way you feel completely confident about, to the point when you feel like, okay, now it's time to send them to Max.
Yeah.
And then I do the rest. And that's the chemistry.
It's an interesting thing because with us, as you say, it is more stem mastering because I have been mixing for a long time. I've been mixing for probably like 15 years, and I have mixed stuff, and I am a mixing engineer. There are certain things that I like to do myself that I am 100% confident in. That I like certain reverbs, I like certain delays, I like certain. Whatever, there are certain things that I would like to decide myself. But once it gets to the point where I feel like I'm no longer being objective, I'd much rather you just make those final decisions. For example, we did a song recently and like the bass sound, I was like, it sounds muddy to me in the low end, sounds boomy, but at the same time, because I've worked on it and I've heard it so many thousands of times, whenever I try and cut anything out of the bass to make it less boomy, it sounds strange to me because I'm no longer objective. So I'd much rather just leave it slightly boomy, send it to Max, and he will instantly hear the problem. He will instantly say, I just need to cut some 150 hertz or whatever, and he will make the decision. But as you say, that's a similar thing with editing. You just need to, and like a guy like Rick Rubin, he does a very specific thing. He's not an engineer. He's not. He doesn't probably know how to use Pro Tools and all that stuff. I don't know.
But he knows people.
Yeah, but he has people who he trusts and he knows to do all of that stuff. And it's just making like we talked before, like recording vocalists, making things comfortable, making things make sense to where you're not overthinking and you can just do the thing that you are good at with no blocks, no mental blocks, no barriers in your way. And I find, for me, the best way for me to progress and produce a lot of content and consistently, creatively have an outlet where I'm releasing things and finishing things often is to just, although I love mixing, for me, it's the best way to just progress is to give the mixing to someone like you, or the stem mastering to someone like you, where you can finalize it and just take me past that finish line to where I can just say, it's done. I trust in Max's opinion. I trust in his final things. I'm not going to mess about with this any longer. I'm going to call it done and move on to the next project. So,
yeah. And probably call it done and move to the next project is going to be like on a t-shirt for us.
We'll get those sorted soon.
Because, call it done and move to the next project is what makes the world go round.
Yeah.
Because not only in our industry, but in everywhere, there are those cases when the project that's been long in the works loses its relevance to what the audience needs or what people need. It may be, again, it may be the car, it may be It may be the movie. It may be anything really. There are timeless things. There are timeless classics. Like maybe, I don't know, maybe there were writers who were working on their novels for tens of years. We're not talking about high art here. We're talking about products. And we're talking about markets. And especially when it comes to bands that have already established connections with labels that have strict deadlines, that's when we have no luxury of meeting the dead end in our mixing thought process.
All of that is good. Deadlines are very, very good.
Very good.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, again, I prefer having a deadline to having no deadline.
Oh, yes, definitely.
That's like that old joke, 5 things that you should never say to your mechanic. The first thing is like, I'm not in a hurry. That's like the old joke, and that applies to any other profession. So if you have the engineer these days, if it's not someone with huge budgets and a manager, if it's a simple guy like one of us, will probably work on several projects at a time. There's no other way around it, because all the projects are unpredictable. Some bands are recording while you're mixing their first song, they're recording their third song. Some others are sending revisions for weeks. So you cannot build a strict schedule like today I'm mixing band A, tomorrow I'm mixing band B, and so on. It's going to be a mess. So we are working on several projects at a time, and it's okay. But it's always better, and I always appreciate to know that the client would like to have their song mixed by the 3rd of September, because then they have a show with Marduk, and they need their new single released before that, for instance, or they have a deal with the label. And even if it's an imaginary deadline, it's better to have an imaginary deadline than having nothing. Just a little mind thing. I know that there are probably people who are more disciplined than me, who can work without any deadlines, but unfortunately, as I said, you have priorities. You have 3 projects. 2 of them are in a hurry. One of them says, take your time. And you take your time.
No, yeah, I agree. I find that nowadays, even if there isn't a deadline on something, for example, if the deadline for something is 30 days, in that case, what I do is I won't work on it for the first 25 days. I'll leave it to the end, so that when by the time it comes, there is a deadline, because I just know deadlines are just... I'd much rather have one day. If you give me one day to do a really big project, I'll be super, super happy. You know?
Yeah, I agree.
Even if it's if someone comes to me and says, I have one day for you to write a whole song, produce a whole song, mix a whole song, I'll say yes. Because I know that I'm not going to overthink that day, and it'll be a fun, creative day of working.
And also that goes both ways, because the client will appreciate this fast turnaround way more, and the revisions will be less of the overthinking kind.
Yes.
Instead of overthinking, then will be straight like, oh yeah, that sounds great. Let's just remove this little part and make a solo a little louder, and let's put the delay there. Like healthy person's revision list.
It's also because if they've been hearing various versions of the song, demo 1, version 2, version 3, version 4, throughout a month, by the time you get to version 67, you know, they've got all the previous versions in their head as well, you know, to compare to. Whereas if you're just starting from nothing, and then you're just in 1 day, 2 days, however many days, you're just delivering the final product, it is what it is. That's your only point of reference. Make your decisions.
Exactly. And also, it's that term demoitis, right?
Demoitis, yeah.
Demoitis, yeah. Demoitis is a thing. I mean, even for people who say, no, I have no demoitis. They do sometimes, and it may bring you to the dark places of a ruined mix and lowered self-esteem, because when you keep being reminded that the demo sounded cooler and there's something wrong in your mix. It's to this, it's not enough that. That's a bad thing usually, because in most cases the demo sounds better because they're used to the demo. So overanalyzing is never a good thing, and we never heard all those possible versions of a mix of a super hit that everyone knows. So take any huge song and you just hear the song. You don't even analyze the song. You hear it as a song.
Yeah.
And when the audience, when the client, I'll say this, when I see that the clients in their revisions start microscoping the song, not just the mix, but the song, they start hearing weird things like the end of the word has the letter S, and that letter doesn't fully match the hi-hat, and it sounds, maybe we should move it, maybe we shouldn't, and it's like 3 pages of that. I'm saying like you're spoiling it for yourself, because instead of hearing the song, you're listening to the details. You are ruining, not just ruining the mix, but you are ignoring the big picture. And everyone who will listen to your song will only listen to the big picture. You got to connect to the audience.
If the person listening to the song doesn't connect or like the first 10 seconds, they're not going to hear that hi-hat and that sibilance mismatch anyway. It's just like, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Then you're listening to many even modern recordings, and you realize that some balances may be way more off than the client's demand, but the song rocks thanks to those little imbalances.
Yeah.
Like I've been listening to, what was the band? Bad Omens.
Oh, I was listening. I was listening to some Bad Omens today. Yeah.
Yeah. Great
I hadn't
mix.
heard them before.
And actually, the kick drum is so over the top, huge, and so gluey, and it almost sidechains the bass compressor or something like that. I would never personally mix exactly like that. So to me, it is too much. But it works for the mix so well that I started thinking maybe I was always too conservative with my low end. Then I thought, why am I so conservative with my low end? And I realized that it comes from the days when you had no modern maximizers, and too much low end would instantly distort the clipper. Any clipper, and also earlier algorithms of isotope maximizer or anything else, too much low end, instant ruin master. These days, people tend to squeeze out way more low end out of the masters. And it sounds awesome. Also because so many people now are listening on the smaller devices that have no low end, and it compensates. So what I mean is that wrong things work because they are not wrong.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, I was listening to those. I was going through the rock charts and just seeing what's currently being listened to, and I was hearing those Bad Omens, and like on my MacBook speakers, the low end is huge.
I think Zach Cervini.
It sounds it sounds like
I
him.
think he. Yeah, and I'm sorry for butchering all the surnames. It's
That's
because
okay.
English is obviously not my native language. And to be completely fair, I must say that one of the clients, and he's very, very picky, one of my clients I'm working with right now, he recommended me Bad Omens as a reference, and he gave me a few tips that actually improved me as a mixer. So it's not the easiest mixing session, but it's very fruitful in terms of discoveries I made. Like he wants dirtier mix, and I realized that hey, I'm probably too tidy with what I'm doing.
Well, those kind of mixes are very, I'd call them wall of sound mixes, where it's just a very
wall of sound.
huge. Everything sounds kind of distorted. It's not my style either, but I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I realized that okay, if that's my weaker side, probably I got to search what's happening in there and find something.
Yeah.
There's something in there for me to discover. So yeah, and again, life is, as an engineer, including our professional life in general also, is an endless set of chances and possibilities that we just never notice. There are always way more options. If it would be a computer game, we would probably play it in 100 different scenarios and finish it with different outcomes, but we have only one way to go through it, to play through it. And we are doing it, and while doing it, it would be stupid to just do one thing repeatedly. It's so interesting to enjoy side quests.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is a good final kind of note to end this talk on, to be honest.
I agree.
Nice little philosophical outlook on our roles as mixing engineers in life, you know? Yeah. No, I think I agree completely. I mean, like, when I hear those kind of really huge modern mixes, they scare me a little bit in terms of like my ability of mixing. I'm like, that is a lot of low end on the kick or the bass or the guitars or just everything in general, very big. But I'll listen to them on like my AirPods, for example, because I think Zach Savini, he mixes on AirPods, Apple AirPods.
Yeah, I guess he does.
Yeah, so like
he does mix in headphones, that's for sure.
So he's really mixing with those people in mind. He's mixing for people who are going to be out and about listening on headphones or listening on earbuds. And when I listen, I'm like, they are massive. They sound absolutely massive, his mixes, regardless of the band he's working with. But it is somewhat scary because I'm afraid to put that much bass into anything, you know?
Yes. And in fact, as soon as I realized that I shouldn't be scared to abuse the maximizer a little more, because I've always been searching for pristine qualities in my maximizer. So I want the maximizer to be almost unnoticeable. But in this case, smash it. Smash it with the low end.
When you're smashing it, it's really thickening and bringing up that low end to the point that you're not really hearing like individual percussive bass notes. You're just hearing every time there's something bassy, like a kick drum or bass, you're just hearing a big wall of bass rather than specific frequencies or notes. Anyway.
Won't work. Won't work for every song.
Yeah.
As always, disclaimer, won't work for every song. But Pro L2 allows that.
Yeah. Great. I think that's a good place to end our first episode then.
Yes, I agree.
We talked for close to 3 hours.
Close to
which
3
is
hours, yeah.
Typical for, like, we try and plan, like, oh, maybe we should do 1. Oh, it might end up being 2. No, it's 3. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll try to be shorter next time.
Yeah, but this is the first episode. We are still getting used to this. And also, like, we had introductions and introducing ourselves and telling a little bit about our stories and kind of not a specific topic for this first episode, but I think in future episodes we will try and pick a topic and try and stick within certain boundaries for each episode. So we can title them.
Yeah. It's literally finish the project and release it.
Yeah.
Approach.
Yes.
But in the podcast manner.
Yeah. No, I think that's good because that's what we've been talking about mostly today, and that's what we're trying to do. Just focus on chatting,
so
giving some
there
information.
will be more specialized podcasts. Definitely, not every podcast will be like a little of something, complete freestyle. We'll definitely do specific series on, I guess, on mixing and also on like diplomacy between the client and the engineer and this and that.
Yeah, it's super fun. Just chatting and also talking about our musical tastes and like you mentioned a band. You talk about Rick Rubin. You talk about the Chili Peppers. I love the Chili Peppers. There's a lot of common ground and a lot of things that we can talk about. And it doesn't just have to be technical mixing stuff either. But as I say, we will try and for each episode have a main theme, a main topic, so that it's easy for people to find and consume and get some specific information out of each episode. But a good end to our first episode.
Yeah, I fully agree. Yeah, now let's have a rest and have a productive offline session. We'll think of some new topics
Yeah.
for the next episodes.
Awesome. Thanks. I'll see you next time then.